I'm Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen. Please accompany me as I stroll through the history, the culture, and the alchemy of interior design. And I have a very special travelling companion this time, my favourite patternista, Mr. William Morris. You know, I'm not going to apologise. This is going to be an unashamed herogram to one of the Olympian gods of domestic design. The patterns of William Morris trail a fabulously drawn comet tail of glory across the face of Britain. They have power, they have integrity, and their originality, even today, 150 years later, is frankly gobsmacking. When I was growing up, my parents' world was a frankly arid designscape of white painted walls, moss green carpets, and sturdily brown Edwardian antiques, the epitome of John Lewish style. The only oasis in this desert of reserved suburban tastefulness was the undulating and succulent William Morris chrysanthemum pattern my mother had allowed the local upholsterer to use to recover the sofas and occasional chairs in the sitting room. In very un-Morris shades of emotionally stunted ochre and stiff upper lip green, I loved the confident draftsmanship and the con brio choreography that sent sinuesque tendrils and dangerously serrated petals on a mad dance all over our furniture. In a house of straight lines, it felt terribly, terribly kinky. And now, well, there's a new generation who are seeing Morris with fresh and excited eyes. His nostalgic, but actually strangely contemporary patterns in dense, rich culinary colour palettes are being hoovered up all over the high street. The perfect pattern partner for everyone's favourite prairie-style party dress. So, where did the William Morris genius come from? There are three things you need to know about him that are crucial to understanding what he did. Number one, he was a hopeless romantic. Number two, he grew up in a very wealthy, solidly middle-class home. And number three, he had a big bum. He is always described as being sturdy, rotund, very hairy and neglectful of his appearance, but he was also very clumsy. And I can just see him growing up, surrounded by his parents' ostentatious clutter, hemmed in by papier-mâché whatnots and Louis the something or another bibelots. All very twiddly, all very expensive, and all very breakable. He himself admitted that his childhood was overshadowed by the amount of chairs he broke by sitting down on them rather abruptly. His life was privileged, and in the smart upper-middle-class environs of 1840s Walthamstow, that privilege was expressed in a Frenchified taste for immense rooms dripping with distinctly dragged-up-looking classical details. It was the style of the court. It was the style of the Morrises' aristocratic betters. Betters who loved to show off all that made them the haves, particularly to the wretched have-nots who were sweeping their grates and buttoning their boots. William Morris didn't like any of that at all. At boarding school, he dozed in the shadows of the standing stones at Avebury or Stonehenge, trying to cancel out in his head the grim griminess of the modern world that surrounded him, with daydreams of some kind of Arthurian mythical past, which actually for him felt compellingly real. The dark satanic mills of Victorian commerce might have been paying his school fees, but his head was very much in a romanticised medieval past, and being a vigorous, practical and kind of get up and go sort of guy, he set his mind on making his daydreams a reality. And of course, thanks to the family, he had plenty of cash to do it. When he was at Oxford, he met up with one of the art world superstars. Dante Gabriel Rossetti was the poster boy of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, who turned taste upside down in 1848 in an art world that had been dominated by huge, highly sentimentalized canvases painted in nasty shades of gravy, the small-scale, jewel-bright paintings of the Pre-Raphaelites with their minute detail and breathless medieval narratives caused a sensation. Of all the artists in the Brotherhood, Rossetti was the very incarnation of the naughty antisocial creator. He was the most libidinous of them, the most amoral, the most bohemian, and annoyingly for him, the least talented. Maurice Rossetti and Maurice's mate from Birmingham, Ned Burne-Jones, set out to peddle a misty medievalism that expressed itself in poetry. Actually, be warned, there's a little too many these and nows, in painting and in lifestyle. With Rossetti and Burne-Jones focusing on painting, William Morris used his family fortune to build a nightly abode in the Kentish suburbs as the perfect medieval light context for the three friends and their wags. And talking of wives and girlfriends, Morris had met and married Jane Burden, a pre-Raphaelite stunner of the very first order. She had a Rapunzel profusion of crinkly princess hair, a cathedral column of a neck, dark-browed, smouldering coal eyes, and lips like huge, overripe, exploding cherries. She was the antithesis of the tiny, short-limbed, plump and pretty girl women mainstream society idolized. She was a lioness, a goddess, a temptress, and unfortunately, Rossetti couldn't resist the temptation. You know, spitefully in later life, Jane said she'd never loved William, but I'm sure that William, the gent, the grown-up, the loyal and respected husband, the devoted father of two rather delicate daughters, took all of this on the chin. He certainly stuck by her, despite the gossip, the scandal, and the tabloid disapproval of the Morris set. Chaotic private life aside, William Morris flung himself into the design business he'd created with Rossetti and Burne-Jones. Still today, it's difficult to find a church in the Victorian suburbs that doesn't have a Morris & Co. stained glass window, a chalice with motifs designed by them, or an altar rail strewn with their particular take on Gothic ivy. The Morris style also hit the home. William Morris poured his passions into the designs he created. Furniture was robust enough to withstand even him. Cutlery, china, ceramics all had a simple, solid dignity just like their designer, but it was the patterns he started to draw for textiles, wallpapers and linoleum floor coverings that really excited the home decorators of the 1870s, and they continue to excite us today. Morris's style is instantly recognisable, and it springs directly from the wistful romanticism he felt towards a distant time in history he believed to be fairer, more peaceful, more balanced. A time before mass production and mechanisation, an era that predated the pernicious urbanisation that was before his eyes, creating a huge, poverty-stricken underclass in the Victorian cities. There was a lot of medievalism around at the time, a lot of architects building fairy tale palaces for plutocrats, but Morris wasn't interested in reviving royal castles. He was after something much more like him, much more middle class. His love was for the manor house. His Middle Ages was studded with solidly built manorial homesteads where the liberal, enlightened, almost socialist, dare I say, lord, lived amongst an extended family and happily well-fed workers in a beautifully embroidered Eden of apple orchards and stencilled ceilings. And this romantically egalitarian branding struck a resonant chord with Morris's own sort, the cash-swollen middle-class market who dismissed aristocratic style of the day as pretentious, despotic, and far, far worse, foreign. I've never actually felt that William Morris made a design decision just to be clever or just to be canny. He kind of just did things because he felt they were right. And one of his biggest innovations has his straightforwardness written all over him. Before him, floral fabrics were rich. They were saturated posies of tropically inspired blooms and floral exotica. Fellow tastemakers like Owen Jones and Augustus Pugin were appalled at all of this botanic licentiousness, and they pioneered flattened, primitive Gothic shapes as a righteous alternative. Morris didn't do that. In fact, he kept all of that highly attractive, highly seductive, ripe blousiness, but he substituted his graphic version of the British hedgerow, the very thing that would move him to tears on his Saturday afternoon nature rambles. So instead of the fleur-de-lis or the heraldic lions of the Gothic hardcore, his pattern's hero snake's head fritillary, willow, seaweed, anemones, tulips, and of course, strawberry thieves. And the good burghers and burgeresses of Britain, in their newly built, half-timbered, tile-hung manorial-style suburban villas, they lapped it up because, thanks to him, they could have all the high-fat decorative detail they loved, but with none of that decidedly off-colour Orientalism. Talking of colour, Morris turned his back on those piercing shades of mauve, violet, emerald, and cerulean that chemistry could now provide for designers. Instead, true to himself, he went back to the recipe book, mixing his own home-dye concoctions of onion skins, walnut shells, madder, and the indigo that left his hands almost permanently stained Smurf blue. Not a great look for one so ginger. So, what is it that makes a Morris pattern so damn powerful? Come on, let's hold hands and jump together into the cool embrace of this honeysuckle from 1876. It is classic Morris, exquisitely drawn with a fairy tale attention to detail and a dizzyingly muscular sense of movement, which is funny because he actually quit painting because he felt his art had so little energy, something you'd never accuse his patterns of. It's a harmonious, natural colour palette that, when you think about it, just radiates summer. You've got those cool, shade-giving greens with pollinatable pinks singing out from the undergrowth. Crucially, though, it is all about his particular design DNA. He hasn't slavishly copied the honeysuckle or those really rather slutty tulips. He's abstracted the sinuous acanthus to act as a kind of foliage frame on which to hang those shoots and those tendrils. This has artistry, artistic insight, and it also has skiploads of love. William Morris has often been derided for failing to do what he set out to do, which was to provide quality hand-wrought design for the masses. And I don't think that's fair. In his own day, sure, his style wasn't cheap, but then it wasn't stupidly expensive either. He was hugely benevolent to his workers. He had a deliberate policy of employing apprentices from the workhouse, giving the abject poor a chance to become skilled artisans. And actually, Although Morris-labelled product might have been only affordable to the moneyed middle of society, his influence was so pervasive that his style, his approach, actually hit the mass market very quickly. And today, you can buy Morris in H&M or in Harrods. The story ends in a Cotswold manor house, very like this one, with William Morris dying quietly at home. The design-conscious suburbs mourned. His international customer base mourned. The nation mourned. They mourned the passing of this good, kind, energetic man who definitely left his world that little bit better, that little bit lovelier to live in. So come on, everyone. Let's raise a vase full of gin to the iconic Mr. Morris and his inescapably lovely patterns. As someone of taste and refinement, I suggest you subscribe to School of Flock so you get the latest before anybody else does.